welcome to Urban Longings. Today we will be discussing urban development and infrastructure, the funding and regulatory issues involved in there. So it's time to bring in the bankers and to figure out what kind of regulatory framework our country needs to make sure that urbanization goes ahead on a good footing. Here's our panel for today. Let's start with Madhvi Puri Butch, who's the Managing Director and CEO at ICICI Securities. We have Mr. Rajgopal Nogja, who's President of Lavasa Corporation. We have Mr. Anuj Puri, who's Chairman and Country Head of Jones Lang LaSalle Meghraj. Finally, we have Mr. Sebastian Morris, who's Professor at IIM Ahmedabad. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. And Madhvi, it's time for the bankers. Everybody talks about the money that you need to get all of this infrastructure on the ground. We all know the numbers. More than $1 trillion that you need on capital expenditure, more than $1 trillion that you need in just maintaining and operating expenses. But everybody seems to be saying that for India, money is not an issue anymore these days. Do you agree?
I completely agree. I think if there was one time in the history of India when capital was not an issue, it is today. I think the relative advantage that India has vis-a-vis all its global peers is significant at this point in time. And indeed, the framework that the government has articulated in other sectors of public-private partnership is the perfect recipe to be able to attract capital into this sector and to really get our policy and our implementation on urban infrastructure going. So it's a very good time for us to be talking about this.
So it's time to bring in the professor here and really talk about, yes, we know that, urbanization needs to happen. We need to have good cities. We need to have more new cities. But all of this is just not happening on the ground. Why has it taken so long and where have we gone wrong?
Well, I think the problems are pretty much core. If you look at the governance issues in for urban development, most primarily there is a conflict between the bureaucracy and the elected. The bureaucracy has still not really made the elected responsible. So what the 73rd, 74th Amendment gives to local elected bodies, the civil service in a sense has negated all that. And today we have a system where neither can be held responsible. So that's why you find in cities nobody is responsible. And the epitome of that is the CWG, Commonwealth Games. The point is not that things have gone wrong, but whom do I go to and tell them? Whom do I blame? We have created a wonderful system where in the urban setup nobody can be held responsible. And that's the core problem. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, we talk about design, planning and so on. Most of our planning outfits were set up under the Ford Foundation way back in the 60s. Now what happened then is, they simply did a cut and paste job of using the parameters which are supposed to be valid for a post-automobile, California-like place, right here. And therefore you have FSIs which are absurdly low. The FSIs are so low in India, it makes us, our urban planners, people who can be laughed at in any kind of forum internationally. Here is a poor country with an FSI lower than 1.2. Now with these kind of FSIs, you're going to make all people, not just the poor, maybe 60-70% of the people illegal settlers. In Bombay, 40% are out on the roads. Okay, another 20% is in Jaws, and 30% do it all on the roads. Okay, so this is a creation because the cost of housing is so high because the land costs are high, and the land costs are high because A, there is no release of land, and B, even when there is a release of land, it comes with such a low FSI that you make everything expensive.
FSI of 1, FSI of 1.5. You look at the infrastructure that a city can support.
That's exactly the point.
It cannot support that. I mean, that's obviously the classic debate right now. But Anuj, you've seen all of this.
I would like to say this. See, my point is, if you look at the infrastructure costs, any scientifically trained urban planner and will tell you the higher the density, there is an optimum density at which the infrastructure cost is actually the lowest. Now, we are well below that optimum density. Now, if you leave it to the market, it may go a little bit above the optimum. Okay, that's about it. So the point is, by design we have made it more expensive. So our infrastructure costs are huge. For instance, if you have this kind of low density, you have chapati-like cities, metro is unviable in most cities except Bombay, which historically had a better layout. Delhi probably will be just about viable unless those people out there give higher densities around.
So before we talk about population density being low, let's take that that discussion forward. And Anuj, really, you look at Delhi, you look at Mumbai, I mean, upwards of 20 million people. I don't think there are many cities around the world that can boast that number. Huge number of people living in very, very small, constricted spaces. You don't have the roads, you don't have the sanitation, you don't have the water supply. Forget about power, that's far away on the horizon. And yet, you know, is it possible really for a country of 1 billion to be able to provide this housing and to provide this whole idea of good standard of living even for a poor? 70% of the people in the cities are actually, you know, well below the poverty line. So do you think we can do this for them?
So Damini, let me say is what's going right and what's probably not going right. What's going in favor and what's not going in favor. Is there an intent? 100% there is an intent. Look at the government, it has definitely an intent. Look at the private sector, there is an intent in doing it. Look at the common man, there is an intent. So they want housing, they want infrastructure, everybody wants that. So, you know, let's take that point that there is an intent. Second is there a capability? I think there is a capability. Look at the airports. So whether it's a Delhi, Hyderabad, Bombay, Bangalore, we've done first-class airports. They're probably better than even most of the mature economies today. Look at the Delhi Metro. We've done it. We've done it within the time frame, within the cost. So the capability is there. Even where there is no capability, there's a lot of international talent that is available, which will come in and deliver it. The third is the finance, and we heard Madhuri speak about the finance. And, you know, whether it's the public-private partnership, whether it's leveraging real estate in these infrastructure projects, whether it's going out and raising debt, whether it's private equity, whether it's IPO, I think there is plenty of capital available. So the first three fundamentals that you were put in intent, capability, and the financial bandwidth, I think we've got it. What we don't have is, I think, respect for time. So we have no respect for time in the time frame that it needs to be done, and that's why all these issues come up. You know, whether there is enough that is being done, how quickly it needs to be done. By the time the infrastructure project is put in place, it's outdated. You know, we put up the JVLR. Very good example connecting the west and the east parts of Bombay. By the time it was built up, it's a chock-a-block on its own. You know, Raj built up the Sea Link, and, you know, I'm told in sort of 5 years' time there's going to be a lot of traffic that's going to get built up because there's no respect for the time it's taken, you know, 12, 15 years for that project to get, you know, constructed. The second is, you know, cost overruns and leakage of money. And, you know, we've heard that again and again, so I'm not going to go too much in detail on those 2 points. But the third, Damini, I do believe, and it is an important point, it may look more emotional, but I think it is an important point, is that we do not give ourselves kudos where it is desired. We beat ourselves. I think, you know, as Indians, we have that thing that we will beat ourselves. We delivered the best airports, we've delivered the best metro, and we should give kudos to ourselves. And why I'm saying kudos to ourselves, because you need to give kudos to the government. You know, just like you and I, when our managers, when our bosses...
So when it's due, actually, Anuj, we would give it. But really, you know, if I'm sitting in the slums and I've been waiting there for the last 5 years for somebody to come around and tell me that, yes, that low-cost housing is going to be there right around the corner. You'll get a place to live, clean water, good hygiene facilities. You don't see that. You don't really feel like giving kudos. But, you know, one Lavasa, it's taken us, what, how many, 60 years to come up with that one dream city? Why has it taken so long? Why is it so difficult?
Damini, I'm very happy that you started with a line 6 years. Actually, it took 10 years where we are right now. We started Lavasa in 2000. Today we are in 2010. And I heard somebody in recent, one of the politicians stood up and said, why Lavasa has been given a red tape? It gets the approval in 2 years. You know, this is the fundamental problem. There are 100 people supporting anything, and there are 5 people who wants to pull your leg. And those 5 people today, generally media give them a more space than what they deserve. And if you generally go more or less, undoubtedly worldwide, many people know Indians are more intelligent than most part of the world. But why this is not happening?
I agree with that one.
Why this is not happening is simple, because we don't have a system by which all of us will say, yes, there is a time period, the way Anuj mentioned, we start in this day and we end in this day. Look at the Shanghai. Shanghai was built in, today they are celebrating 30th year of completion. Why it's possible for them to complete? Purely because if the day on which there is a decision taken that we have to complete it, they just go ahead. In our country, whenever if there is a question, all of us have a say in everything. And we don't even want to listen to experts.
Experience True to life 3D depth with Samsung 3D LED TV.
The competition is plain ruthless.
If you press the buzzer, you got to start answering and not calculating.
The wrong strategy and defeat stares you at your face.
The negative is a -5.
Catch the Tata Track final of the Tata Crucible Business Quiz 2010. Only on ET Now.
Brought to you by Tata Leadership with Trust.
Meeting? Now? Ginza Complex now, fast! お客さん見てください。とっても美味しいね。No, no, Ginza Complex fast! 一番美味しいお店にお連れしますよ。Access the world of interesting apps on your LG Optimus smartphone. Life's good when you live interestingly.
We actually put this to the citizens of India to ask them that if they could go and tell their city administrator where to spend the money in their city, where would they like it spent?
I think my hard-earned money should be invested into a road infrastructure, basically for the road, for the betterment of the signaling system.
I think the government should put their money, which we pay as a tax, on the roads and in the the sewage system. Instead of building this high skybox and all, they should build more roads and the flyovers.
Government has been spending adequately on road infrastructures. You got a lot of flyovers that are actually decongesting. But now I think the focus should be more on green spaces.
That's right. Everybody talks about that. Every time you bring this question up to the people, they will always talk about the fact that you have all of these malls, you have high-rises coming, but basic amenities, nobody's looking at that.
Overall, the city infrastructure as a standalone entity is completely profitable business. Whether we are discussing even sewage, water, electrical distribution or IT infrastructure, all these kind of things, they are very profitable. The only thing is how we manage them and how we plan them. In Lavasa, when we are talking about all these infrastructure, the Ciscos and Wipros decided to put in equity in IT infrastructure. Only when they felt there's the money, the equity returns are there. But let's look at why it is not happening in most cities in our country. Bombay, I'll take an example. Recently, government of Maharashtra came with a very unique policy that for every X square feet of a parking space you build, you will get a Y square feet of a FSI. Already I saw a noise happening in some media that this is not good, this is going to do an additional. Today, look at the road widths in Bombay. They are as good as the most part of the world. But we are not able to use that 3, 4 lane, 5 lane road widths only because more than 70% of the road is a parking space. So if we don't allow the parking structure to happen, whether we are discussing nanos or BMWs, we will always have this challenge. So we need to promote, like today's Sydney case, the way Sydney develops its most of the infrastructure. If I want to build a building, along with the building I have to take care of a flyover, road, intersections and all that. It's a part of my planning process.
So it's the responsibility of the corporate to do it?
Yes.
Okay, well, we certainly need to adopt that model in Gurgaon where I live because, it comes from first-hand experience that you have big Tier 1 builders who've built up these huge office commercial complexes where there is absolutely no kind of parking system to talk about.
Again, I'll take an example over here. Let's take a Gurgaon example. We constructed a complete new city over there. But look why it has happened like that. Because you develop Gurgaon plot by plot. We should have developed as a master plan. Till that time we go with a plot by plot, the guy who's deciding, he's got a control only on that plot. He doesn't have a control over all the whole system.
Let's get back to Gurgaon and understand, what is basically wrong with cities. Now the Gurgaon idea tells you, and it's a pattern that gets repeated in city after city. You had Delhi, which was so over-regulated, pushed to such low FSIs, that you killed it on the one hand and you supplied the basis, the rent, all the rent seeking which went on with money being spent. Now somewhere down in Haryana on the boundary, there was an unregulated village. People started building high. Today that has become the city center of this large urban agglomeration. Okay? So the point is you are unable to regenerate your own cities because you have regulated it to death, no FSI. So all our city centers are dying and kind of subsidiary points of development are coming, multiplying the infrastructure costs. Now if it happens on two ends of the city, you can imagine the crisscross costs. Now in Delhi they were lucky, it happened in Gurgaon and it happened in Noida, Faridabad. So that's becoming an axis and costs. Now in Delhi they were lucky, it happened in Gurgaon and it happened in Noida, Faridabad. So that's becoming an axis. And well, it's okay, it's like, now we can talk about Gurgaon, but it's an accident. Similarly, if you look at Pune, the entire northwestern, western region, western side of Pune development is an accident. Okay? The center of the city anyway is occupied by the army and the cantonment with a density lower than that of a village.
It's a fortunate accident.
So, no, you call it fortunate,
because at the end of the day, it's a huge amount of economy. There is some up there. It's an enterprise, it's an economy that is crowded there.
Enterprise comes at a cost. See, this is what results in denial. The cost of a hotel in India, you go to Bangkok, you and me can walk into a hotel at 2,000 bucks. That's nothing. And you can get the same that you get here for 10,000 bucks, the same quality. Why? What is the difference, dude? Not enough has come up. Similarly in housing, why are the poor, and forget just the poor, even the middle classes are excluded because you're making the cost very high. By doing it wrongly. What you are saying is, look, let there be no power, there will be a lot of enterprise in the form of portable diesel DG sets.
But that's a different Professor.
Let's get back to this low-cost housing because that's really key part of city development.
Damini, I will put the whole discussion in a different way. Whether we are discussing whether is the huge area is occupied by X kind of people or government support systems or anything. Why? Why suddenly Gurgaon become more successful than Delhi or Pune outskirts have become more successful than center? Is the percentage of economic activity happening in this city, the job which got created. The moment when I'm mentioning that 270 million new young kids has to be absorbed in an economic area, it means we have to create an economic opportunity. Why Gurgaon got created? Because Delhi restricted itself with a 5% non-commercial development. The moment worldwide, it takes top 100 cities, successful cities around the world, they have a ratio of a 1 square feet of a non-residential with a 4 square feet of a residential. Why in Lonavala you don't get a decent towel when you go with the same restaurant or same hotels to say? Because the guy, if he will not have a 70% occupancy in his hotel, it's impossible that he will give you good towel to use. For that reason, there has to be economic activities in the city. The cities with the more economic activity. Same Bangalore 1990 was a dying city, is most happening city today. Why? We created a more economic opportunity in that city. So with more economic opportunity getting created in the city, you automatically, it's a part of the policies of your state. Which city today invite, barring Gujarat to be very honest, or to some extent Maharashtra, no other virtually a state say that please come and set up something in my city. Which city you heard last time? Because city don't feel responsible for inviting. Today you go to United States, every city manager will give his scorecard, where your rupees spent, what kind of a job I got created in the last year, all this scorecard, where are the scorecard of my cities? We don't create economic opportunity in our cities. Why the person from a rural India comes and sleeps on a footpath of Bombay? Because in a footpath of Bombay he can generate 100 rupees, which he can't in the rural India.
Absolutely.
Experience true to life 3D depth with Samsung 3D LED TV. This week on Leaders of Tomorrow series, catch the success of White Daisy, Annamalai Exports and Shrine Knit.
Main thing is the quality, then the timely deliveries and the new designing.
ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு கிராமத்தில் பிறந்து அங்கிருந்து வந்து பிசினஸ் தொடங்கி இத்தனை கோடி ரூபாய் அணி செலவாணி பண்ணி
I consider 50% hard work and 50% of the luck.
Leaders of Tomorrow, only on ET Now. Brought to you by IndiaMart.com. More buyers, more suppliers, more business.
टोनी, तू मेरा बेस्ट फ्रेंड है ना? मैं तुझे एक सीक्रेट बताऊं? तेरी मम्मी का वेज खाना मेरी मम्मी के नॉन वेज से अच्छा है।
न्यूट्रिला, अब जो सच है वो सच है।
टोनी, मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि मैं वेजिटेरियन बन जाऊँ।
a man on the footpath, and really for 70% of most urban population, that's where you have slums that need to be developed into places where you can have people getting a decent roof over their heads. And there was some math done on this, which I want to actually put across, Madhvi, to you first, because you're the banker on the panel. 275 square feet is the amount of space that one study threw up as what you need for a household. And it actually costs 4.5 lakhs to get that. Affordability is still only at 90,000. So here's that family with only 90,000 in the pocket. They need 4.5 lakhs to get that space. You know, how do you bridge this gap? With affordable housing, everybody's talking about it, but it's not going off the ground because it just looks unreal when you see it on paper.
Absolutely. I think there are two things here. One is, as we've been discussing, is the cost of the land itself, which is linked to the FSI that is permitted. And the second is indeed the scale. You know, the cost of simply building houses is just that much more when you don't build to scale. And therefore, the point is that if you build new cities, the ability to build that to scale and to be able to bring down the cost of that city is where the answer lies. But the linkages and the fact that, you know, Mr. Rajgopal was saying that you need to first create a core over there of a livelihood. If that livelihood does not get created, there will be no residents. So it's all an interlinked issue. And that's where I repeat that there is no solution to this other than the whole concept of a single point of control and a public-private partnership surrounding it. And the rest of it is just in the execution, which indeed is possible and feasible.
Well, you know, Rajiv Gandhi Awas Yojana, you know, Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission. Anuj, you see all of this. You hear all the builders talking about low-cost housing. How many of them are actually doing it? And in the next 5 years, how much do you expect to see come?
So, Gamni, everybody started to doing it in 2008, 2009. The real estate market melted. Everybody went into affordable housing. Real estate market is bad, so everybody's exiting out of affordable housing. That is what the reality is in the private sector. But that's fine. You know, private sector is private sector.
Because you have...
No, but that's the private sector. That's the job of the private sector. You can't say that is not fine. They're responsible to us. No, not at all. The money is lesser compared to the premium. So the premium and the luxury has got a higher margin than the affordable housing. But affordable housing is a very large play in this country.
And I'm telling you, needs to do something to make the private sector step back.
I think it's a public-private partnership. I don't think so you can ask the private enterprise by force to say, you know, can we ask your TV channel to run pro bono? It can't, because it's private enterprise. Similarly, you can't blame the private developer to say, no, you have to do affordable housing. If the government comes in and they do a private-public partnership, it's a success. On the outskirts of Bombay in Karjat, it's a big success, the way that it has been delivered. And I just take that example what Madhvi gave and yours numbers. If you look at 265 square feet, and Raj, bear me out on this, I think it's about 800 rupees a square foot on the affordable. It's no more than 160, 170,000 rupees. You're saying is that the cost that the individual can pay is 90,000. So the gap is not between 90 and 400,000. The gap is between 90 and 160. The balance between 160 and 400,000 is the land cost. Now, if the government comes in and says, here's the land and build it on it, there is the solution.
Anuj,
so the government can't understand this?
No, I think the simple point is more than this maths. It's simple. Either we always lived in our country for most period in a socialistic life, cost subsidy was a way of living. The reason today we see the interest rate, I get a rental income. Otherwise, the most ideal method, I don't have to go ahead and sell the houses to the economically weaker section. I can always give him a 2,000, 3,000 rupees monthly rental houses or even 1,000 rupees monthly rental houses. But when it is possible, I construct a house at 12% interest rate. And my rental available in our country today is 3%. Yeah. With 3 to 12% gap, it's impossible that any rental units is going to be successful in our country.
But 3% is something that you can't even imagine. I mean, where will we get 3% funding for housing? For rental housing, it wouldn't come, Madhvi. So this will never happen.
It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. So the makeup is really in the capital appreciation. You know, nowhere in the world do you have rental income equal to the interest. Otherwise, why will anyone rent, right? They'd all do it on EMI. So the difference is in the capital appreciation. But I would say that there is, you know, the question that Anuj was raising, that why will the private sector invest in low-cost housing? To my mind, it will come out of just simple, enlightened self-interest. At the end of the day, if you see Lavasa, the way it has been planned for the low-cost housing to come in, because the planners understand that when people come here to live, they will need service providers, they will need maids, they will need drivers, they will need gardeners and all the rest of it. and where are those people going to stay? So in their planning, they have already built into it the fact that you need extremely affordable, low-cost housing. Now, it's back to the question of scale. So as you plan and as you think about it, it is enlightened self-interest that will create an ecosystem where the private sector itself will invest and invest heavily in low-cost housing as well.
The point though is that, the government needs to act, because if you look at broadly all the activities that go on in a city, there are some which can be categorized as weakly appropriable, okay, such as education, sewerage and sanitation, water supply and so on, weakly. And others which are eminently appropriable, that means the private sector can get it. Now these so-called public aspects or the public goods, the state must provide if it does not, it must lay out annuity and do that. So the moment it does that and lays out a credible scheme, it should not even bother about those which are appropriable. The private sector would do that. For instance, what is low-cost housing? If you really liberate the land laws, make a little bit more land available, I believe even in a city like Bombay, the entire slum population can be accommodated. And I'll tell you that the arithmetic needs some recognition. See, today an average slum dweller pays a rent to a dada, which given a normal price of land, or let's say zero price of land, he can more than with that much buy up what he lives on. So there is affordability, money is all there, but it's basically on the regulatory side that we end up failing.
Well, we've come to the end of the discussion because we're running out of time now. Thank you so much for being on the panel. That's the view coming out really. We were talking about the regulatory environment that we have for urbanization, about the funding, where it's going to come from. And really the key takeaways, once again, the government needs to wake up, get its act together, make sure that the center, the state and the local governments actually coordinate with each other. There are many different agencies. They all need to be knowing what the right hand is doing and what the left, so that it can all be one seamless system. That's one. Funding is available, but of course, once again, the whole issue of having transparent policies, and the government needs to really give some impetus to city planning. You need to have city infrastructure funding available for our cities, low-cost housing. That's once again a key area of focus that we need to look at, and that affordability gap needs to be bridged. We of course also spoke about the cost of all of this, but money is coming. That's what seems to be the broad conclusion here. It's just that it needs to be channeled right and channeled well. Well, with that, we come to the end of this show. We hope you enjoyed watching it. We will still continue with this series. We still have a lot more to go, so hope you will tune in next time.
Experience Fruity Life 3D Depth with Samsung 3D LED TV. This week on Leaders of Tomorrow series, catch the success of White Daisy, Annamalai Exports and Shrine Knit.
Main thing is the quality, then the timely deliveries and the new designing.
ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு கிராமத்தில் பிறந்து அங்கிருந்து வந்து பிசினஸ் தொடங்கி இத்தனை கோடி ரூபாய் அன்னி செலவாணி பண்ணி
I consider 50% hard work and 50% of the luck.
Leaders of Tomorrow, only on ET Now. Brought to you by IndiaMart.com. More buyers, more suppliers, more business.
Rock show? College festival? Idol show? Just gonna get a haircut, man. All barber shops here are closed today.
India Times Travel. Fares so low, everyone has an excuse to fly.
चिंता क्या करते हैं सर? हमारे पिताजी कहा करते थे कि खेती का असली मजा तो कटाई में है। हाँ, वो तो है। हल्का और बेटा राम मिलन फसल चाहे जिसकी भी हो, अपनी समझ कर काट। ऊपर मत तब समझोगे बेटा कितना छाटना है और कितना काटना है। एकदम लवली लग रहे हैं सर।
बाल आप इनकी पसंद से कटाते हैं? नहीं ना? तो चैनल पैकेजेस डीटीएच कंपनी की पसंद के क्यों लेते हैं? पहली बार टाटा स्काई लाए हैं ट्रू चॉइस पैकेजेस, यानी पैकेज वही लो जो पसंद हो। टाटा स्काई, इसको लगा डाला तो लाइफ जिंगल आला।
This week, brand equity cuts across a variety of verticals from a dangerous trend in the industry. We're calling it the multiple personality disorder to what the Indian FMCG giant is doing to up its game in the digital space. Don't forget to catch us at these times only on ET Now.
Brought to you by SR. Let's begin. Naya Fortune Plus Low Absorption Oil. Mirror-like impressions, eco-clean, pure paints.
I think cricket is a very funny game. Success मेरे सब साथ है, लेकिन जब चोट लगती है, इंजरी होती है, तो खुद को मालूम होता है उस दर्द के बारे में. जब तक बल्ला चल रहा है, हाथ चल रहा है. जब बल्ला नहीं चलेगा तो फिर.
बिरला सन लाइफ इंश्योरेंस के वेल्थ विद प्रोटेक्शन सॉल्यूशंस जिंदगी के उतार चढ़ाव में जियो विश्वास के साथ.